Peter, I'm going to turn it over to you. Have fun, and thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's really a joy to be with you all this morning um, and share in this way. I wanted to start this morning with a song of Swami Kriyananda's Walk Like a Man, because I think that fits this theme of how should we meet our tests. This song itself was a declaration of Swami's that he had the right to think for himself and to interpret Master's teachings how he saw fit. There were others that were telling him that he didn't have that right. And so this was his response to a great test as well. So this is Walk Like a Man. You can sing along at home if you know the words. Walk like a man, even though you walk alone. Why court approval once the road is known? Let come who will, but if they all turn home, the ghost still awaits you. Go on alone. Follow your dream, though it lead through worlds unknown. Life's but a shadow, once our dreams have flown. What if men cry, your dream is not your own? Your soul knows the answer. Go on alone. Give life your heart, bless everything that's grown. Fear not to love you, all this world's your own. Make rich the soil, but once the seed is sown, seek freedom, don't linger. Go on alone. Walk like a man, even though you walk alone. Why court approval once the road is known? Let come who will, but if they all turn home, the ghost still awaits you. Go on alone. Go on alone. Go on alone. It's interesting that when Swami is talking to us about overcoming our tests, he's not giving us some great instruction about, or specific instructions of how to, you know, conquer whatever we're trying to conquer or whatever. He really focuses on talking about putting your focus on God and ultimately telling us that it's directional, that everything can be a process of enlightenment, but that it doesn't happen all at once. We have to be patient. So he says, focus on God and be patient. It seems very, very simple, but so oftentimes it gets complicated. And that's what I wanted to talk about today, is just um, to have some guidelines of how we can. Sometimes it's hard to even know which way is up. This world gets very confusing. So have some sort of sense of where we're going and how we can overcome the obstacles that come before us. He talks about the three gunas: Rajo guna, Tamo guna, and Sattva guna. And these levels of consciousness are in us and around us all the time. We manifest all of them at different points in a day and different points in our lives. But we'll be predominantly one or the other typically. And so, as we probably know, but I'll just review it briefly, this tamoguna is this deadening quality, darkening quality, or it just wants to go to sleep and just go sink. And Rajaguna is very activating and energetic, enthusiastic, And then Sattva-guna is elevating, enlightening. And it's said of, Master said of himself, when Swamiji was complimenting him, he looked deeply into Swamiji's eyes and said, just a bulge on the ocean. Meaning that the wave of his consciousness was just barely defined from the ocean, the infinite ocean itself. And so there's some waves that are very big and proud and you're crashing against the shore and doing all this. And then there's the great avatars that are these great ocean swells that are just on the bosom of the ocean and with the ocean itself. And so this is a really beautiful way to think of the gunas, that it's that which brings us into the ocean of spirit, and that which is drawing us away. There was a beautiful image that, again, from this interchange with Swami Kriyananda and Yogananda, where Kriyananda thought, he was a young man and just thought that Yogananda was just asking for sort of a rudimentary understanding of astronomy and the motion of the planets, where he's saying, what Yogananda just very innocently is asking, what keeps the planets from just spinning off into space? And Swami says, oh, well, he must just want this understanding. Let me tell him how this works, And Swami said, oh, it's the gravity of the sun. And Master said, well, what keeps the planets from going into the sun? You're just being pulled in by that gravity. It's the centrifugal force that's pulling outwards. And the subject is rested. And it was months later when Swamiji was meditating on that exchange, he realized that Master was talking about divine love, and then our own momentum is the centrifugal force pulling outwards and keeping us always engaged outwardly and always being pulled out into the world and out into all the distractions and everything. It's this momentum that we have that just keeps us spinning around. And there's that divine love at the center that's trying to call us back. I was thinking of this in terms of the gunas, that there was, I don't know if you saw this some years ago, there was this picture that was taken of a satellite that was leaving our solar system. And the last thing before they lost communication with it, they had to do is they had to turn around, face us and face the sun, and take a photo and send it back to Earth. And so they developed, they received this photo. Sorry, my lighting is changing. There we go. They received this photo, and what was amazing to me about it was that the sun, you could see the sun, and they pointed out that this is the sun, but they had to point it out because it was almost identical to the rest of the stars. And I was thinking of this in terms of Tamoguna. It's pulled so far away from the sun, the source of all light and all love, all energy in this analogy, and it's pulled so far away, it can't even tell really where the sun is. And I think that's how these gunas work. The Tamoguna is trying to pull us away, and then the Rajaguna is this activating quality, and then the Sattvaguna is that what's drawing us back towards the sun. But even Sattvaguna has to be overcome. There's in the hymn to Brahma, it says Triguna Rahitam, meaning he who has overcome the three gunas. It's talking of the guru. So all of these qualities, because all of these qualities has to be overcome, because even Sattvaguna is still tied to individuality, to separateness from all spirit. And so the true guru has overcome all of these qualities, and that's the goal for all of us. So taking this essential point, we have to be conscious of where is our energy. Where is our consciousness moment to moment? And this is why Yogananda said the moments are more important than the years. We have to be conscious here and now of thinking, where is my consciousness going? Am I moving towards that sun of spirit, that sun of light, of joy, of beauty and bliss? Or am I just getting busy? Am I just getting confused in the world and getting caught in thinking that all the ephemeral things of this world are what are really important, when of course we know as devotees what is really lasting and what is really important. Our soul is eternal. The light within us shining is eternal and omnipresent, and we have to find our way back to that. And it's, like Swamiji says, we have to be patient. Some of these things, Tamoguna, it said, is like an embryo emerging from the womb, or growing in the womb and finally emerging. it's just because it repulses even from spiritual development itself. It just takes time. Sometimes these things just take time, but if we keep putting our consciousness on the divine, on that Son of Spirit, we can be slowly putting our energy so that towards the sun, so that we're not just continuing that cycle of the planets and keep pulling outwards. We can be being absorbed into that sun, which of course, again, in this case, is divine love and infinite bliss. It's nothing. It's not a big fiery mass, of course. But one way that has been really helpful for me is to think of Patanjali's 8 aspects of God. These 8 manifestations of God are love, light. Let me say it differently. It helps me remember all 8. Love and joy, light and sound, peace, calmness, wisdom, and power. And all of these are manifestations of this divine consciousness, and we experience, I think why these are so helpful is because we can experience aspects of these. We can feel, when we energize and so forth, we can feel divine energy, divine power flowing through us, flowing through our will when we're trying to accomplish something. We can feel love for a friend, for a lover, for our child or a parent. We tune into these things, but they're tangible. We can grab hold of them. But then we just have to remember that all of these, as far as God is concerned, are infinite. And so we can just simply expand on what that little experience is in our daily lives, expand and get some notion of what infinite love feels like. So it's not just centered in my heart, but it's center everywhere, circumference nowhere. And it's flowing through all creation. We can sort of visualize, we can expand that feeling of love that we feel in our hearts at a certain moment, even bringing up a memory where we felt particularly filled with love. We can expand that out into all creation. So we can use these 8 aspects of God to even know where we should be going, to remind ourselves, oh, am I shrinking or am I expanding into divine love? And that shrinking and expansion is often a really good guideline in itself. That's what all of these things are ultimately about. And in terms of that shrinking and expansion, I've been really drawn recently to Sri Yukteswar's meannesses of the heart. And they often, from time to time, they'll get mentioned, but people rarely list them out. And so I actually wanted to do that today because these meannesses of the heart are essentially the opposite end of that. They're things that essentially, he was saying, are keeping our heart bound and keeping us from expanding. It was translated as magnanimity of the heart. When we remove these obstacles, this natural magnanimity of the heart can expand. So the heart can expand and grow into spirit when these things are removed. And so I wanted to go over them because some of them are very obvious in some ways, but some of them are a little less, like I wouldn't have thought that of 8, if he was going to mention 8 things that are limitations on the heart, that these would be them. So I just wanted to go through them real quickly because again, it can help us sort of see which way is up when we're confronted with a test, and it's helpful to have it be as clear as possible to our consciousness so we know which way to go and we know how we can elevate our consciousness whenever we're met with something, because we have the choice. We always have the choice to move closer to God or to sink, to fall away from God. And it's a moment by moment choice. So if we fail one time, we just get back up and we try the next time. Nothing is permanent here, but except for the goal, the everlasting bliss when we finally reach the goal, that's permanent. But so let's just go through these meannesses of the heart. And the first one is hatred, and that's pretty self-explanatory, I think. But what's interesting is if you notice all of these things are talking about separateness. All of these meannesses of the heart are shrinking in on the ego, saying, I'm separate from you. Like even to hate someone, you're saying, I'm separate from you. You are, we're separate and I don't like you, basically. So there's a real strong division there, right? But the second one is a little less obvious. It's shame, which is interesting. But what happens when we're in shame? We're shrinking again. We're shrinking back on ourselves. We're thinking there's something that's, I'm so embarrassed by what I did wrong. Oftentimes we pile on guilt on top of that. It's this heavy burden to carry. Like I'm so bad because I did this embarrassing thing. And it's all just weighting us down and making us shrink into the ego. Shame and guilt. It's this withdrawal from spirit. There was a time some years ago, where I had hurt a few people, and I was ashamed of it, and I had, it just was all it was a really trying moment in my life. There were very difficult circumstances and all this, and that's my excuse. Anyway, no, but I was really sinking, and what I realized is that when I went into shame, I felt like I was the image that came to me was, I felt like I was swimming in the ocean, let's say, but I was holding on to a boat anchor. And so I was just sinking. And when I would let go of shame, it was like letting go of that boat anchor, and I could rise and I could feel an attunement with Yogananda. I could feel Yogananda's presence. But then I'd go, well, but I really did something wrong. No, 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 no. And I'd grab onto that boat anchor again and start sinking. And then I'd go, and I went through a few cycles of this, letting go, trying to tune into master. And I realized the truth of this, where it doesn't help anything. We need to look at what we've done wrong so that we can grow and learn from it, so we don't have to repeat the same mistakes. But we don't have to hold on to it as an identification, as saying, I'm so whatever, I'm being defined by this mistake. What's interesting is I went to Jyotish and Devi after that, and they even talked to me, and I was telling them, and I was still maybe going into this shame a little bit, and Devi looked at me and said, Peter, you didn't even do anything wrong. From her perspective, there wasn't even anything wrong. Maybe there had been a mistake, but it was just the circumstances, and why am I hanging on to this so tight? But we tend to hang on to these. Anyway, I'll move on. The next one is fear, which maybe is a little bit more obvious again. But there's that beautiful line in the Bible, perfect love casteth out all fear. And so this fear is the opposite of expansive divine love. It's a withdrawal from expansion. It's a shrinking in on the ego, where it's a self-protective, like you're trying to keep everything at bay so that you can feel safe, secure. And as devotees, we need to be very aware of this right now, because there's such a concerted effort in our society to create fear, and it's primarily, from the media, and maybe there's even difficult, obviously we're in difficult times, but that doesn't mean we need to be afraid. We as devotees need to be very aware of this so that we can be instruments of love and expansion, and not be shrinking in ourselves in fear. We need to be tuning into, again, these eternal parts of our own nature. Our own inner nature is eternal, omnipresent. This is the part that is connected with the divine, with God, with omnipresent love. That goes through all the outer turmoils of the world, through the rise and fall of civilizations, through all time. That is ever constant. So we need to be more and more tuning into that ever present, the Satchidananda, ever existing, ever present. That was from the poem Samadhi. Ever new, ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss. Is what I was going for, of Satchidananda. So it's eternal and omnipresent, this reality that we're going for, and we need to be moving more and more back to that. The next meanness of the heart is, again, a little less obvious. It's grief, which you wouldn't think necessarily would be lumped in with the rest of these, as a meanness of the heart. But if we're thinking of expansion and contraction, expanding towards infinity and contracting in on the little self, the little separate ego, grief, when taken the wrong way, is a downward pulling, where it's saying, I'm so sorry, like you should feel sorry for me. It's so sad. In one of Swami's songs, he says, why multiply grief with despair? And so when it's this grief turning to despair, it is a shrinking away. There was a time of deep grief. I mentioned a few weeks ago, my father's passing, And that was a time of deep grief for me. I was very close with him. And what I found though, because we don't want to suppress the feeling, so at first I was trying to just be like, oh, I can just handle this spiritually, I go to the spiritual eye, and just, we know all the teachings and we can just, but the heart doesn't really work that way. So I found that there was this feeling I could go into this grief of moving into despair and shrinking, but I could go through with Master, I could go through the grief, the heartbreak, but I could turn it upwards and say, Master, walk through this with me, guide me through this. And it became a beautiful, just transformative experience. And it helped me understand love in a way that I hadn't understood before. Because the heart is broken, it's open, and you're uplifting it. You're offering it upwards. And the divine can come in and slowly just heal the pain of loss. And so this is how grief can be turned upwards, so that it's not a meanness of the heart, but it's actually something that we can share with the divine and help us and ultimately move closer to the divine. Help us learn how to live with an open heart. The next meanness of the heart is condemnation, which is a very interesting one. He didn't say judgmentalness or something like that, but he said condemnation. Because I think we get really into trouble and shrink our hearts when we're not just sort of noticing, using our discriminating faculty and noticing what's happening and all this. It's when we're going, you're bad and you deserve, you don't deserve love even, or whatever it is. Like when there's the separation of like there's a lot of arguments and so forth today about just all the circumstances that are going on. So what if it's your opinion is different from me and therefore you're ignorant, you're dumb, whatever, it's really easy to slip into that. Partly again, because the media and so forth is encouraging that kind of behavior. So we have to be very aware again as devotees that we don't want to embrace these meannesses of the heart, because again, they're helping us shrink, and we as devotees want to expand and embrace the infinite, embrace the Guru, God, Divine Mother. And so it's very important. It doesn't matter what time we're in, what country we're in, again, what the circumstances are. We need to have this purity of heart and expand into divine love. It's what it's always about. The next one is race prejudice, which has been a big topic recently as well. And it's pretty obvious. It's a very superficial differentiation. These bodies, again, we need to tune into what is eternal. These bodies, it doesn't take us very long on this earth to realize that these bodies are not eternal, right? And so we have to tune into the inner spirit and realize before each of us is a child of God. And I know I'm talking to devotees, so I know some of these things are obvious, but it helps it helps to repeat them so that it's very clear in our minds again. And I would just add that it doesn't matter what race you are and what race the other person is. Again, these are principles of spirit, that we're withdrawing away from spirit into the ego, or we're expanding outwards. It doesn't matter what time we're in or what continent or whatever. None of that matters. It's about the expansion of the heart. The next one is pride of pedigree, which is interesting. I always thought pedigree meant like title and being proud of like what university you went to and things like that. But what pedigree actually means is the family. So I think of like the lords in Europe, in more like medieval times, where it's like your prestige and your power and all this stuff is coming from your family. And we have less of that, I suppose, today. But there can still be a pride of your heritage. And it's not that you should be denouncing your heritage, but if you're setting yourselves apart, again, that separation is what we're trying to get over, and the shrinking away from seeing God everywhere and in everyone. It's interesting, Swamiji mentioned that the pride of pedigree in organizations, particularly spiritual organizations, can be usually more manifest as pride of position. So there can be a certain ego about, a certain self-importance. And spiritual pride on the spiritual path it's an easy pit to fall into and a hard one to notice, actually. So just even pride of your spiritual accomplishments. Because I think why it's so difficult is because it's based on something real, where we are tuning into deeper spirit and we are becoming more expansive, more loving. But it's just like this: when we become proud of that, we're actually shrinking back down again. We're losing the expansiveness. So we just need to remember that it's God loving God. It's God flowing through us. It's all God. And there's no even the ego that we try to tie things to and be proud and all this, even that is just a manifestation of the divine. And in the last analysis, it all just gets absorbed into the divine. And the last, meanness of the heart, I found very interesting. And I think it's, I'll just say, it's the last meanness of the heart is a narrow sense of respectability. And I found that one so fascinating because today, if you go on social media, especially Twitter and things like that, that's like most of what Twitter is a narrow sense of respectability. You stay between these lines and you're okay. You step out of those lines and you're unworthy, you're ignorant, you're dumb again. But it's this separation. I'm right and I'm special, and there's a very exclusive group in here, and everybody else can do whatever. I don't care about anyone else. And but again, that's such a divisive thing, and as devotees, we need to be aware of this, even if it's just coming in subtle ways. I'm mentioning these things because it's so easy, especially in the culture that we live in, for these things to just creep in a little bit. The people that don't agree with your political party or don't like your president or don't, whatever it is, they're ignorant and they're whatever. It's just so easy because it's being so encouraged. These attitudes are so easy to fall into. And so if we can remove that narrowness of the narrow sense of respectability, it's almost like it's enforcing a narrowness of our heart, and we can expand those walls ultimately to embrace infinity. That beautiful line from Walk Like a Man. This is one of my favorite lines from Swami's songs. Give life your heart, bless everything that's grown. Fear not the loving, all this world's your own. And so this is with the heart. What we need to do is be expanding to see that it's God everywhere. It's God flowing through us. It's God loving God. And in all of creation, it's a manifestation of divine love. And that God doesn't care, about God cares about your heart. He wants your love. He doesn't want us to be just indifferent to divine reality. He wants that awakening divine love as much as we can in our daily activities, in our meditations, the expansiveness of the heart. I was sort of just jokingly musing that after we die, as we're told in these death and return stories, there's often a tunnel of light, and you go and you meet Jesus, maybe Yogananda, whoever it is that you're tuning into spiritually, any of the masters, and then there's sort of a life review. And I just I was just sort of jokingly thinking about like how just ludicrous it would sound if Jesus is up there going, well, so where did you land on the whole mask issue? Like, it's just so utterly meaningless, yet it's become such a big important thing in our society today. Where did you land on the whole mask issue? But of course, with the question that Jesus or any of the masters would ask is, how much did you love? How expansive was your love? Were you seeing God in all? This is what's really important, and it's always what's important, always and forever. This is ultimately what it all comes down to. And so we need to be in moment by moment, as much as we can. Again, if we fall flat on our face, just learn, move on, brush it aside, just keep going. Apologize to someone if you have to, like if there's someone that's been hurt by whatever mistake. But just, we need to keep going. Walk like a man, just putting one foot in front of the other, have a tall spine, and move forward from the heart. Give life your heart, bless everything that's grown. Fear not the loving, all this world's your own. And if we do this step by step, we keep putting our focus on God, Swami says, with a bit of patience, and we just keep putting our energy up to the spiritual eye, up to the divine. We focus on the 8 aspects of God. We will one day find our freedom. I wanted to close, not literally right there, with another song of Swami Kriyananda's. And this has always been one of my favorites, actually. This is the Psalm of David. And as I understand this story behind the psalm, is that King David is on a battlefield and is for a moment is separated from the battle and finds himself alone, and perhaps there's some fear that the battle will be lost, or even perhaps that his kingdom would be lost. I don't know all the circumstances of the battle, but he begins to pray. And so the first verse, as I look at it, is the hymn calling to the divine. I will lift up my eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, who made the heavens and the earth. And then the following three verses are response, I believe. This is my interpretation of it. That's how I read it. So again, he was facing a big test in his life, and his answer was to put his faith in God. So you can close the eyes. Actually, let's meditate as we listen to this, and tune into that quality of self-offering and surrender to God, even in the greatest trials, because that's where the true answer lies. We can be responsible in this world. We need to be responsible in this world and act accordingly and all these things, but we need to remember as devotees that underneath all of it, what's important is that we're surrendering to God and we're calling on God. I do have my guitar here. I realize it's off screen here, but let's go inward and listen to this Psalm of David. I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, who made the heavens and the earth. You will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth,
Peter, thank you so much for everything, but for offering these two songs of Swamiji's. That last one is incredibly meditative and inward and beautiful. And Walk Like a Man or a Woman is so appropriate for each and every moment of our lives. Thank you so much for adding the songs to your words of inspiration. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's really a joy to be here, so thank you so much.
Yeah. So, folks, this is the time. If any thoughts, comments came into your mind, we can begin to offer them. And I'm just going to say those 8 meannesses, are those in the Holy Science?
Yes, they also, Swamiji mentions them in the Art and Science of Raja Yoga.
Oh, okay.
So he also puts them there, so.
Well, I think they're well worth, I wrote them down because well worth remembering. It's not something I can't say that I tune into very often, but, and not that we want to dwell on them, we know that.
Right.
But we want to be aware, and I like that these are more in terms of our everyday life. You know, the way they're written, the words are great because we all experience them in our humanness. So I think that's beautiful. And last thing I'm just going to say, when you were reading them, the song, a line from the oratorio, maybe you can sing it. It's very short. Get thee behind me, Satan. That
Yeah.
that when these come to mind, we just need to redirect our energy. We need to be aware of it and then redirect the energy. I can hear Patrick Mahoney singing that line in the oratorio many, many times, and in all over Italy when we had that choir tour. Yeah. Do you know that? I'm sure you know that line.
Get thee behind me, Jesus declared. Satan, know you not, our Father offers love in your stead.
Beautiful and so forceful.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to mute myself so others can speak and connect with you.
Wonderful. Any thoughts? Anyone?
Hi, Peter. This is Kim.
Hi.
Thanks for being here. I remember when you took over your mom's healing prayers that one time. I think it was in July. And you started, you started with the singing, and I like how you use that to sort of set the tone and get us into a good vibration. So yeah, that was it's really powerful when you were leading that healing prayer session on that day. So thank you. And when you were, another thing I wanted to just mention about the meannesses of the heart was that Darshan has just done a very beautiful blog. If you go to Nanda CC, I think over the summer he was taking each one and relating it to his own life. So you may or may not have even seen that. That's kind of a big theme that Ananda worldwide seems to be really examining.
Yeah.
And while you were talking about them, I was trying to. I've been going through a big thing at work. That is a real challenge. I've never gone through anything like this before with my boss, and so I was kind of saying, okay, which meanness of the heart am I in, and which one is she in, and trying to examine that. And I really relate to the idea of that these are cycles, and you just constantly. I keep lifting her into the light, and I keep seeing her in love and light, and I keep, help me, Master, help me, help me, help me. And then I feel good. And this is all internal, of course. And then it cycles back down to like, well, what is she thinking? And I go right back down to like, she must be crazy, like all this kind of thinking. And then I was like, no. Wrong, time out. Lift it up to the light. And so, it's all human nature. And I really appreciated that you were talking about that with grief. And I'm sure we can all relate to it with other meannesses of the heart. I think I'm in fear, and I think she's in condemnation, but I don't know. I don't want to overanalyze it. I just keep bringing it up. So thank you,
Yeah.
Peter. It's lovely that you're here, and thank you for your
Oh,
talk.
thank you, Kim. Nice to get to see you face to face too. It's fun that you were part of that prayer session as well. I'll probably sub for my mom sometimes, maybe even once a month as we go. So it's
And
fun.
Kim's
I
in
really enjoy it.
Austin,
Ah, okay.
and one of
My
our,
brother,
yep.
my brother has just moved to Austin this year, and so I'll be going out and visiting him probably periodically. So
Well,
lucky,
I'll
lucky
say it
charm.
for Austin then. If you go to Austin and ever want to connect, we have an Austin meditation group that is quite active. That
That's
when we
good.
were meeting in person, they were meeting on Sundays in a little upper room in a church, and that's on pause right now. But I'm just going to say that if you go and you ever want to connect with the Austin group, let me or let Kim know, and we'll get you to Kim or Ellen, who are
Hmm.
the energy folks in
Great. That would
Austin.
be a lot of fun. Yeah.
And
Yeah, that would
Frank,
be.
is
And
Frank
Frank is here
online?
too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
he's
have
here.
Austin online here. We have quite a few different little, yeah.
Devotees in Ananda Palo Alto just released this, and it's available through Crystal Clarity, and it's I think $25. It's 190 pieces of music, so it's all what is it? The Ananda Songbook. It's all of Swami's vocal pieces, all that had singing in them, and it's really beautifully done. It has just to a random page here. It has chords, words, has the different verses here down below. Has the melody written in, not the where there's choral parts and harmonies and stuff. It doesn't have that. It just is melody. Um, but here's a nice example of what they do if you play guitar. I don't know if you can see this, but they have two lines. They have the one line for that's just the open chord, but then also a capo line, so you can play the capoed chords. So to guitar players, this will make sense. So, but so that you can very easily play easier guitar chords for a song and play with somebody who's playing the harmonium or piano or whatever in the same key. So it's a really lovely treasure trove. 275 pages of songs. So
Wow.
I hadn't really totally cognized that there was such a need, but once it came out, I went, I got my copy. I went, oh my gosh, what was I doing before? It's really just such a resource and a treasure trove of inspiration. So that's something I'm trying to do is just pick out some songs on the guitar and rather than just going to you know to Netflix or something like that, let's bring out the songbook and play a few songs and sing and get some inspiration and go into a meditation that way rather than just always going to. We need some of the downtime too. I'm not condemning Netflix to go back to our theme, but just it's a really joyful experience to be able to sing the music. Yeah.
No, that is huge. Thank you. And Victoria's over there in California, Northern California, around, well, I'll say the Chico area, however specific that is. But that she was in Texas and then she went to California and then she was in Waco, Texas. Now she's back in California. So she's part of our Texas community for many, many, many years. And that songbook, thank you. I mean, some of us, the musicians, can go online into the music library. However, this is what we had no idea. I didn't. Victoria didn't. I know she's a musician. Say, Kim, yeah, thank you. Crystal Clarity's buy stock in Crystal Clarity because we're all going to order this book.
Right. Yeah, it's wonderful. So it was let's see, it was Karen Gammo was involved with this. She might have been the leading. And then if you know Brahma, he's not a brahmachari anymore, but oh gosh, I'm blanking out on his name.
Dambara? No?
His name used to be Graham. I forget his spiritual name. Oh gosh. Anyway, it slipped my mind. But then also a devotee that was part of Ananda Sacramento now lives in Hawaii actually. Ken Salisbury was also one very instrumental in making that happen. Tandava, that's what I was going for. Tandava was in Palo Alto was um, helps make that happen, and maybe others too, but those are the ones I'm aware of. Yeah, so a um, real offering of love that they gave to all of us. It's really sweet. Any other thoughts?
Got hey, Peter,
Hi.
it's Eric Biskamp, and I'm here with my wife Shakti. It's interesting. Somebody mentioned holding up, someone in a situation to the light. But one thing I've found of recent is sometimes we have expectations of what we want God to do with the situation or the person. And I've found that grace, and I'm just wondering your thoughts on it, doesn't work as well when we expect a certain result from our holding it up to the light. Does that make any sense?
It does, and I think it has to do with that we're not completely surrendering it to the light. If we have a certain expectation, divine will doesn't follow our will, So if we're completely surrendering it, we're asking God and light to uplift the person, let's say, the circumstance, but we're also surrendering ourselves to God's light, to Master, and asking ourselves to be uplifted in this whole situation, to be uplifted. And I think when we're putting conditions on what that grace should look like, I think we're limiting it a little bit, and it doesn't, God has the eagle eye view, and there's you can see the whole panorama of what's happening, and what is the the lessons that are unfolding for each individual, and what people need to learn, and what their next step forward is. And it might not make sense to us in the moment, and maybe not for a long time, but there's I just think it's that sense of surrender that is kind of what you're tapping into, that if we can be wholly surrendered, the flow of grace can just be much stronger. Does that ring true?
Sometimes I feel that over time, and I've been experimenting with this quite a bit lately, thinking on past things and past people, and holding those situations, those times, those memories up to the light. After a time, I do feel more freedom when I come to that memory or that person, but only truly if I just give it to grace, to God, and then let it go as much as possible. Because I find that I want it to go a certain way, and it's just, I think that somehow stands in the way.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's really interesting though. Well, it bears it. It's I think important to remember too that when we've committed a lot of energy to a certain pattern of behavior, or whether this life or past life, there's a certain energy that's been set in motion. Our concerted energy to uplift it, to offer it to God, it essentially, the energy needs to balance out. So sometimes when things are deeply ingrained, or there may be specific karma with a person, when that's deeply ingrained, it can take time for that energy to resolve. But if we keep, this is what Swami says, if we keep putting our energy in towards God, essentially, and uplifting the whole situation, blessing the other person, asking them to be uplifted and everything, if we keep doing that, we can resolve the karma eventually. It may take a long time. We have to have that patience that he was talking about too.
Yeah.
But it's the way to actually untie these karmic knots and these patterns of energy.
Well, hello, and it's Mike. I very much enjoy your singing voice. I know you do it very, very well, and I know you have some effort in it to do it all just right. And it's so good in so many ways. So I am grateful for that. I was going to say that every interpersonal relationship thing, it's like all I think I need to do is ask Master what my next action is, or, it's not like I need to take responsibility for any particular result.
Mm.
It's just a matter of, in meditation, getting past all the negative emotions. So it's very good to from time to time review the 8 maintenances of the heart and for self-assessment there. But in meditation, we've got an ability to get past any negative emotion, really intuit what God is trying to tell us. And that all we really have to do is ask him a question
Mm-hmm.
and then just follow what he says.
Yeah. Well, and that's what you're doing in that asking. You're doing what Swami's talking about, where you're just turning it back to God. You're bringing God into the equation, and so it's that in itself is part of the answer. Yeah, that's beautiful.
It's just very simple, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not always easy, but it is surprisingly simple. This is only sort of related. I was just remembering there's a good friend that's visiting, and a few years ago we were talking, and he he said, "Peter, I learned long ago that I could be right or I could be happy." And I decided to be happy. And it's not that he was wrong in being happy. It's just that, we can be like, oh, I know the exact, I know all the data and I know all the facts and I'm going to win this argument. And we can have that kind of energy, or we can just be like, you know what, that just doesn't matter when we go back to love. And I really enjoyed that, because I was having this thought this recently that, well, actually, this came from Naiswami Asha. She said, when you're in that, that tense, angry, where like you're trying to prove a point, when your energy's off, we all know what off energy is. It doesn't matter how right you are, you're still wrong. And I thought that was a really interesting way to put it, because anything you do with that kind of energy isn't going to come out right. But if, like you're saying, Mike, if we're tuning into God and we're saying, what is my next step? What, is my energy right? It cannot, and we're using surrender like we've been talking about. We can oftentimes, with that little step back, that surrender, we can actually find much better solutions to the problems that are confronting us than we would find if we were, going on with whatever that energy was. We can step back and some intuition can come in as we offer ourselves up. It opens the doorway for more of that intuition to come in when we're coming from a place of stillness and inner poise. So it's all connected.
Thank you very much. I think it's also very freeing and liberating to not ever really have to decide anything myself. And it's like, it's whatever God says to do, but it has to be a developed intuition that it really is right. And you just know it calmly within, and it doesn't matter what the result is.
Well, and it sounds like you've been developing your intuition for some time, because sometimes it's hard to tell a true intuition, but if we test it, if we in little ways, and we learn what the true intuition is and what is just sort of our desire taking over and going, yeah, this is the right answer, right? We can learn the difference. And so it sounds like it's been a practice for you to always tune in. So that's great. Because that's the only way to develop it, is to just trial and error, essentially. But when something has that feeling of rightness, yeah, there is that. When we can know that it'll work out some way. And again, it may not be the way that we think, but there's something trying to happen, as often gets said in Ananda. What's trying to happen? What's trying to happen?
Hi, I'm Malorie, and thank you for your talk. It's really helpful. Really helpful. My experience with bringing God into a difficult situation was I constantly was reacting to a political figure. I like politics, I'm interested in it, but I was constantly reacting to this person. So I started praying for him, and it was a process that was really interesting. And where it ended up was with this new, it went through a period of where my heart opened and I felt compassion, and I do, for this person. But also then it came to a place of neutrality where I didn't have to react. It was just neutral, and that was so great. So freeing.
Wow.
And so now I'm praying for a couple of other people that
Good. You know, we all need it. You know, the politicians or your gurus, whoever it is, you know, we all need it. So, you know, this is another thought that came from Asha, that was just really an interesting one for me to think about. And it was actually, I was thinking about it in terms of politicians as well, that I was getting triggered by, was that when you see somebody, I don't know if she was talking about it specifically in terms of politics, but that's how I was using it. But as we go on the spiritual path, we learn how difficult it is to untie all these karmic knots that we've developed, and the time that it takes. And she was talking about coming to this point of compassion, really sincere compassion, when you see someone who's going the other way, somebody who's piling on all the karma, like, taking advantage of people and, insulting people and all these things, that they're just piling on this karmic load, and they're just racing in the opposite direction. And she was finding that there was just this genuine compassion of just going, oh, because in there's a soul that's just going to have to undo all those knots. And it's like, ooh, when you think about it that way, of the round trips, or that they're going to have to do, it's just, you can really come to a place of love, like you're talking about. That's really a beautiful experience. And that sense, I love that. I mean, being able to be neutral, because that's you not being in the reactive process anymore. And yeah, beautiful.
Anyone else want to tune in, share, comment? It's after 12:30, so we'll start wrapping this up, unless there's something else. I want to say encore, but I won't do that since you already sang 2 songs, David. Dear Peter, thank you. We don't get many live like that. Yeah.
Well, it's really a joy to share, and it's something that's been a part of my life. I grew up in Ananda, and I had some of these songs as a child. I'd have some of these songs going through my mind, and oftentimes I'd only learn one line. But I was maybe like a year and a half or something, 2 years old maybe, and there was a period where I would always sing the same 4 songs in a row as I went to bed. I would sing myself to sleep, and my dad knew the order of the songs, and so he'd know, oh, he's almost asleep, he's on the last one. And there was this little, I don't know, who knows where that came from, but it's very interesting that, yeah, anyway, it's been something I've obviously been drawn to my whole life, but well, it just opens my heart, so that's really what it comes down to.